Okay, so pricing in an organization. We can go to the next slide. So we've covered a lot of the stuff, like in both the other webinars leading up. There's stuff that are universal and that you can carry over. Everything from getting your ducks in a row to pitch for tender or grant. Same with costing and pricing, whether you are doing that work for a grant or whether you're doing it for a tender for project, or in some cases, if you're doing it for in-house projects. So out of my experience, I have been part of teams pitching and costing for grants, but it's never been my core function. I've mainly worked with projects and my own projects where we either pitch for work on costing and pricing for tenders, or we have projects, or we actually also spend a lot of time training people that are in manufacturing and fabrication that do that need to put together costing and pricing, sort of more on that side of things. Sorry, just flip one back again. So yeah, costing, the cost, again, like we said before, is very much the things that you can measure. It's the reason we sort of refer to it as the science side of things, is it's sort of mainly measurable stuff, or things you can calculate, whether it's direct or indirect cost. You could work it out. You could get, even if you need to contract people in on a specific job, get materials for a specific project, get hire equipment for a specific project, you can work it out reasonably closely before you and get to and add it into your costing. With, you know, it's a measurable thing. Next slide. So yeah, labor, rent, transport, materials, consumables. So, you know, this is like all indirect and direct cost, and you can work with that. Okay, next slide. I'm gonna bang through. So yeah, like before, with Anna, what Anna also said is you need to be aware of what your cost structures are. Like, I'm speaking from my business's point of view, we try and have that at top of mind, even if we are asked off the cuff to, which is never a quote or never a pitch, but I know that it cost us X per person hour or person month to keep the roof on, and then, you know, all the direct costs for a project can come on there. But you know, you need to know what it is, and you need to keep it up to date. You need to know what your direct and indirect costs are, and what influences that. You know, is it an annual rent increase that changes your hourly rates, your square meter rate, your person hour rate, your whatever that might be. Next slide. So yeah, your there's the, like I said before, you know, you need, what we do is, I'll show you a spreadsheet a little bit later, where we, for instance, for one costing on a set of products, where we basically have it in the spreadsheet that we can update any of the material, any of the costs on it, and it automatically updates across our whole product range and adjusts our margins and everything. And yeah, that's, again, be on top of that stuff. All the extras that you need to bring in to deliver a product or a service, all those variable costs. Next. Anyway, then there's I was watching a video recently of somebody that's in fabrication, and you were saying, and when he was a a young designer and a maker, the most valuable thing to him was his tools and materials, and he didn't value his time that much. And he was not very experienced, so he would take days to fabricate or produce something. And the biggest cost in his calculation was materials and materials and overheads and equipment and so forth. But the man hours, that was not that valuable. Later on, as a very experienced person, the material cost becomes, or the overheads, and becomes a much smaller part, because now you can do the same project in an hour, and your value per hour becomes much higher. But what Anna was saying, and Andrew was saying earlier as well, if you can charge higher rates, but it also is, do you deliver value in those higher rates per man hour, or man month, or person month, or person hour? And that is a very important thing. You can't charge exorbitant rates and not deliver value. And that value is also defined by a lot of different things. Can we go on to the next slide?
Well, I just want to say, this isn't just a tendering thing, this is a grant thing as well. I mean, if you're, you can sort of sell the value of your approach, of your organization's purpose. You wouldn't necessarily do that in the same way in terms of the price. You might do it in terms of the person, the day rates. But certainly you can talk about various strategic advantages and find costs of doing things. Now, let's compare a makerspace quickly to other organizations. You do hands-on stuff. These other people that are doing, say, business development programs, they might be teaching everybody how to develop a software app, or how to, TVET programs that help people to learn how to be a carpenter, or how to fix a motor car, or how to be a waiter or a waitress or a hairdresser. You're doing something really unique in a makerspace that perhaps a TVET program hasn't ever funded before. And if you price it too low, then maybe when and they get excited by it, then you're stuck with those low prices for a while. Yeah, so it applies to grants too. Thanks, Felix.
Yeah, I think to that as well, not leaving money on the table, understanding what value you bring to the market. This comes back to understanding who you're selling the product, the service, who you're pitching to, and understanding also what value you bring to the market. A makerspaces are far and few between. They're also able to, one, not just make products that might be filling a niche, or but also do, like Andrew was saying now, provide a service where a TVET college might be hamstrung by other outside forces like legislation or curriculums or whatever, that do not allow them to provide a niche service in a certain training program or something like that, or access to the expertise or the technologies that might be in a makerspace. And scarcity in a skill or a service that are provided. If you are a master carpenter, the scarcity of your skill in the population allows you to command a higher fee. Understanding what the value is that you bring to the market and what the market can bear is part of the alchemy side of things. It's part of understanding what you bring, what the level of skills you bring, and understanding what the market could bear. And underpricing or misunderstanding or overpricing, you'll probably overprice yourself out of the market, out of the job, or out of the project. But underpricing is almost as bad, as big a crime as a business or as a business person or as an entrepreneur, by leaving money on the table. So yes, again, that you get to the price with knowing and having your cost, and then on top of that, you, especially if you're producing a product for sale, not necessarily always a service, and you know, normally when you are working on grants and so forth, you're basically providing a service to the project or to the entity that provides the grant. But normally on a lot of the time on a tender, you might be the first person selling this in a whole value chain as a producer. So we always try, especially on the products that we produce, or that we basically break it down that you need to have a cost price, the costing, and that's your cost price. It's a cost that it costs you to produce that. That's everything. And because direct and indirect cost changes per product, per project, that cost is always fluid, but it's like we said, a measurable thing. Then you have the wholesale price and the retail price. We always sort of, when we work with people that are small manufacturers, recommend that you have both. And this is where you need to also start understanding the market. And there's what influences what you can charge in the market. So the retail price is all like the final price to the consumer. That could be influenced by competitors. If there's a lot of competitors, the margin you have between the retail price and the cost to produce becomes much smaller, because you've got to stay price competitive. But you might be value competitive. You might be doing something in that market segment that's twice as good or twice as fast, or you might bring other value in the eyes of the beholder, of the customer. They can look at the product or service and look and ascribe a value to it in many different ways. Price is one thing, you know, quality is another, time is another, service around the product, you know, maintenance services, backup support, depends on what the type of product is, but all these things add value. You know, that's why you buy a cell phone contract. You can get all kinds of bells and whistles added to that cell phone contract to add value to it, to make it more appealing. And you'll see it, you know, in a very competitive market where a lot of people are selling the same thing. They try and add value in other ways. You know, you get you get an extra set of earphones if you buy our phone, or etc. You know, there's other stuff, perks and things that you can add, but that can determine what your retail price is. Then somewhere in between that, if you're selling directly to the end consumer, you want to be selling at retail prices. But if you have other people that would sell on to you, you need a wholesale price. And we normally have, you know, and it's also something you might negotiate, or you might set and say, well, you know, we'll put 20% on our cost, and that is a wholesale price, and another 20 on that, it's a recommended retail price. We'll retail at that, but if you come and buy like 1,000 of these things from us, and you want to on-sell it, we'll recommend that you sell at the same price as us. We normally use that in a scenario where you have somebody that wants to on-sell your product, they want to retail your product, and you don't really want to retail at wholesale price, because then you undercut your own clients, basically. And at the end of the day, a happy relationship with your client, your wholesale client, means that they'll buy more. Even if they sell for less or more than your recommended retail price, that doesn't really affect you. If the more they sell, the more you sell. But that's, yeah, let's move to the next slide. I might be skipping slides or going back and forth a bit. So yeah, wholesale, we normally look at that as like a bulk sale. You know, if you come and you want to buy a lot from us and to sell on, we'll let you buy it wholesale. And that's often what you find as well. If you go buy as a company or business, you'll buy wholesale. So like again, retail, that's sort of the market price, the price to the consumer. Next slide. Yeah, so again, back to what I said earlier, be open with your wholesale clients about the recommended retail price, because it just keeps things nice and clean. Next. So the actual value, again, putting the value to a product, trying to work out what that price is at the margin you can put onto your cost. So there's like objective value that you can add. That's sort of the measurable stuff, you know. It's like the market price, the price of competitors, what bandwidth, you know. There'll always be a little bit of a bandwidth that you have that holds your price in a place. Sort of the forces of the market where you are selling. You know, the more niche and exclusive you are, the less competition, the less this affects your options to price higher. Next. So yeah, this is subjective. That's sort of, it's a perceived, the perceived value, like I was saying earlier. It's what value does your product or service have from the client's point of view? What do they perceive as value? And what are these value adds? You know, quality of workmanship, time is delivery, or any of these things. Next slide. So just a bit of an obvious one. If you know your true cost and you cover that, you know, it's obviously not clever to sell below cost because then you will pay to do the project or the job or to make the stuff. The only reason you could ever want to sell at cost or below cost is to just liquidate the input that you've put into that product or project. It's then you know, the reason you need to understand your cost, your wholesale and your retail prices, because it also puts you in a negotiation position where you can, if you need to negotiate a discount on the retail price, you know where your wholesale price is. If your retail price is 150, your wholesale price is 100, you know how low you can go. It's not you know, and same with the wholesale. If you're doing a wholesale negotiation, it's never fixed that you will sell at that wholesale price. Somebody might come and say, well, you know, I want 10,000 of your things. Let's talk about this wholesale price. I want 10% less. But if my wholesale margin doesn't allow 10%, then you need to know it. You need to understand, have that maths in your head or those figures in your head, so that when you do that negotiation, you do not end up saying yes and then selling for less than cost. So those three levels are just part of.
Yeah, and I think in grant funding, this is where the matched funding question comes in. If they say you have to put in 25% of the total grant in matched funding, what they're asking you to do is to take on 25% of the cost yourself, of the total grant yourself. And that sucks. Like it's, you know, if the World Bank is asking you to do this, it's not because the World Bank is short of money. It's because they're trying to it's because they don't trust you. And that circumstances have arisen where, or because they want to try and get other people involved. So you know, what Felix is talking about here is the strategies your organization might use, and you know, the thinking about the margins that you might use across every project, across every job. As a general rule, then, yeah, know your cost and never sell for less than your cost, and that includes having to turn down donors that require you to have matched funding, unless you can find some other way and some other donor to help fill that gap, to make sure that you know, you can charge that 25% to somebody else, and potentially get more benefit out of it that way. Thanks, Felix.
Next slide. Yeah, so I'm rushing ahead of my slides a bit. That's good. Make up time. Yeah, like I said, know your wholesale margin, know the space that you have to negotiate your wholesale price. And then you need to also, you know, we mentally put in like limits in our how low are we. At a certain point, we won't go let 20% wholesale minus 20%. That, you know, doesn't work for us. That doesn't, you know, that's just, then it's not worth our work, you know, our while to do the project anymore. There's other products we can work on or sell that have got a better return. And you've got to, we call them, we've got a few house rules. I'll share some more as we go, but those are just sort of, you know, we just put a mark there, and everybody in the business knows that's the mark. We don't go, the negotiation stops when somebody wants more than that. Same for retail. It's a very similar space thing, you know. You might have somebody would want to negotiate on your retail price. You might be selling something out of hand, one product directly to your customer, and they want to negotiate, and you need to understand where you either undercutting your other wholesale buyers, your other wholesale clients, or, you know, whether it's worthwhile. But knowing those limits in your, or those layers in your pricing allows you that power to negotiate with confidence. Yeah, skip this slide. We covered that. Basically, how low are you prepared to go? So, for instance, yeah, back to the person hour day. Next slide. So, you know, working out. So in our business, for instance, we worked out. We've got an idea of what a person day cost us. And when we sit and do a costing on a project, we can, for instance, say that this is going to be 10 person days on this project. That's that cost. And then what are all the direct costs? What materials? What other resources? And then you can start building costing like that. So there's some of these shortcuts, and then we basically keep that updated. Yeah, our spreadsheet for that's a bit broken now, but we have spreadsheet. I'll show a spreadsheet now on some product stuff, but we can update the, you know, if we have a salary increase, or if there's another cost to that person day that changes, we can update it. And we know plus minus, you know, a person day is $100 or something, for instance. And it just helps us when we sit down and do costing, not to go down into the every little cost that comes, that's part of your costing structure. You can actually have sort of things that help you just make that whole thing easier, so you don't do everything from scratch every time you do a costing. So yeah, we basically have this spreadsheet. We have it for just like tendering, but we also have it for our own in-house products we produce. Next slide. So yeah, again, as I said, in the spreadsheet, we adjust our costing, and we also even do stuff like if the projects you work on are seasonal or has a season, we do film work projects. We do a lot of props as one of our revenue streams is props for the film industry. That happens in the summer. In the winter months, there's a lot less work and it's a lot more competitive to get those type of projects because everybody that supplies that service is hungry. And we have a winter rate, for instance, that adjusts all those costs input to a degree, and also our margins more than the cost, because there's some of the costs that we are prepared to tweak, maybe a lower rate on some stuff, or we prepared to pay a lower rate to freelancers that we use that becomes direct cost. But we for instance have a bit of a winter rate versus a summer rate when there's too much work around and the clients are desperate because there's very few providers that do what we do, and all the providers are oversubscribed, and there's basically it's a seller's market in summer. So next one, okay, there's for instance, this is sort of the summary sheet. I can share my screen maybe for the rest of the spreadsheet to go through it. But if you look at it, so we make hand carts, sort of street for waste recycling, for street cleaners, and we've got a whole range of clients in these areas. And our carts are, there's basically, you can see there's all the blue and yellow tabs at the bottom. The blue, green, yellow tabs are different models. There's a whole lot of other models that sort of been discontinued, that the tabs are hidden. But we can basically use this sheet to change any of our costing. So if you look at the first column is all the models, then you'll see right at the top it says the basic option. That's basically the bare bones cart, and it has the materials, labor, cost price, and then a wholesale price. The next set of columns is GPS. So we provide an added service or added product, value add product to the carts. The clients can opt in on a GPS module, so they can do fleet management or asset management. They can track where their carts are. And then the next set of columns, a maintenance contract, basically a maintenance. How much are we gonna, you can pay a monthly maintenance fee per cart. And if you see the red tabs at the bottom, that's sort of, each one of those pages have got a list of costs. And if any of those costs, if we've got about 10 different types of wheels, if the price of a set of wheels that we use change, we can update, and that updates the whole costing for us, and also sort of gives us an idea of the margins. This is just to give us something to work off. This is not our black and white final pricing, and because that all involves marketing and strategy, and who we're selling to and what other services we provide for them if we customize it or stuff. But this gives us a good backbone costing, basically.